Roughly 5 months ago, I switched from my iPhone XS Max to my Galaxy Note 10 Plus that you see here. A lot of my friends ask me, Alex, why in the world would you switch from an iPhone to an Android? Like, who does that? Well, there were a few reasons behind the switch, and I'm making this video to tell you guys why. The first reason is that I was bored with iOS. When I switched from my iPhone 6, that you guys can see here, when I switched from this phone to the XS Max, yeah, at first, after the first few months, I was like, oh my goodness, this phone is so great, it's amazing. Like, I love like the auto display, no home button. It's such a big display, 6.5 inches. It is so smooth. I realized that it's basically the same thing as this phone, just different hardware. Now I know you can say that for basically every single phone. Let's say if you compare this phone to the Galaxy S9, you can find that it's basically the same thing. It's the same software, the same everything. But there was just something different. Like I don't know. It was just when I switched from the 6 to the XS Max, I was like, why is everything so similar? Why am I not getting anything new from it? And the reason that I felt this way is because even though Apple updates their devices with new versions of iOS, I still felt that they weren't putting enough effort into those changes to keep me from going to an Android where I could experience a different type of freedom when it comes to my device. They weren't adding anything mind blowing, in my opinion. But this wasn't the only factor affecting as to why I decided to switch from the XS Max to the Note 10 Plus. Um, Before I decided to purchase the XS Max, I was doing a lot of research, educating myself, watching a lot of YouTube videos on the XS Max, on other phones, and all that. And I just got really into the topic of smartphones, and I decided to educate myself. And it was just really interesting. And that was around the time, a little bit before that, the Galaxy S10 came out. And when that phone came out, I was pretty amazed. I'm not gonna lie. It had the hole punch display, which looked really clean. It had the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner. It had the 4K 30 frames per second front-facing camera capability, which was the first of its kind. It had never been done before on a smartphone, and I was blown away. But to me, it wasn't enough. However, that would change with the Note 10 Plus. When I switched from the 6 to the 10s Max, I was like, I was amazed. But I soon realized that I can't customize anything on the Note 10, and on the 10s Max. I can't customize anything on the 10s Max and really make it my own. Like it was the same flat display, had like the usual home grid, and that's when I realized that on an Android I can do all of those things and even more. And before iOS 13 came out, I was one of the people that decided to do the iOS 13 beta testing. It got all the dark mode features and it was fancy and all that. But I realized, is this it? iOS 13, is that it? Just dark mode and that's it? So I was like, you know what? I'm thinking about switching to an Android. So, why not? And I have been an iOS user for quite a long time. This is the iPhone 4S, I think, and then it's not alive anymore. It doesn't charge. Power button doesn't really work. I don't have any cables to charge it with because it still has this older connector down there. But comparing my usage from this phone to the iPhone 6 to the XS Max, I thought it's basically the same thing, but it's just different hardware. Like, they're not really doing anything to the software to keep people inside. They only have iMessage, the smoothness, and AirDrop, and all that fancy stuff, and that's about it. Now, the second reason that I decided to switch from iOS to Android was that I wanted something different. At the time that I acquired it, the XS Max was the newest iPhone. It was the greatest thing that Apple had ever put out at the time. I also got it at a time when I was starting to educate myself more about technology and smartphones, like I mentioned earlier. The Galaxy S10 series looked very interesting when they came out, but I wasn't completely convinced. It wasn't until the Note 10 came out that I was like, okay, Samsung really is doing something with their devices. If you just look at this color, like it's amazing. One of the main reasons that I decided to go for the Note 10 Plus was the giant display. This thing is 6.8 inches, and it doesn't have a notch. It has no notch up there. It's very clean. It has almost no edges, and I absolutely love it. Compared to the XS Max, the iPhone 11 Pro Max, even the 10, the normal 10R, and all that, the 11, they all have a notch up there. And to me, like, this is very futuristic. Just look at it. And this phone came out around August 2019, I believe. And it wasn't until November that I decided to get it, Black Friday and all that. So I did give it a really long time to think, and by the time November came around, I was solidified. I was ready to make the switch. Now the third reason that I decided to switch was that Android phones aren't what they used to be. My first Android phone was an LG Leon. Like the specs on this thing, it's 4.5 inches. It has the Snapdragon 410, 1 gigabyte of RAM, 8 gigabytes of storage. You get the point. After this phone, I acquired the iPhone SE, and that phone, since it's an Apple device, it's pretty fast. It was actually decent, although it was pretty tiny for my hands, as you can see. I still managed to use it for some time. But after I got the iPhone SE, I remained with the impression that Android phones are laggy and that they're slow. But that's because I was just using a device that didn't have like as much power compared to the Note 10 Plus. I realized that Samsung began to use One UI for their devices, and it made a complete difference, as you guys know, compared to TouchWiz, which was the one that was pretty laggy, the one that people didn't like. When they decided to use One UI, that's when things decided to change. So yeah, those are the reasons as to why I switched from my iPhone XS Max to the Galaxy Note 10 Plus. This amazing device. It is, without a doubt, one of my favorite devices of all time. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and God bless.